All right, today we're talking with Vladimir Baranov, executive coach for technology and science executives. So, Vladimir, thanks for being here today. I'd like to start off in going back in your background and tell us where you're coming from.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot for inviting me over, Joe. So my background stems from being an engineer most of my life, eventually moving into an executive role, and then
Mhm.
to now being an executive coach. Started out as electrical engineer building robotics back at the university. I spent about 15 years in fintech building trading systems, and half of that was a co-founder of a wealth management SaaS. So I went from a larger organization to a smaller because I wanted to be more of an entrepreneur. And then I realized that my time in fintech was kind of up, and I moved into aerospace, which I thought was more aligned with my purpose and my vision. And I joined a very small startup of 3 people that we grew to about 35 people and $50 million in government contracts, launched a couple satellites. So that was a very interesting experience as part of it, which I was able to interact with a lot of veterans who were transitioning from the force. And we hired a few veterans for our own company and eventually transitioning over to being an executive coach because over my years as an engineer and executives, I have identified a big gap of how academia and the society teaches professional skills and does not teach any skills which help you become an entrepreneur and executive. So in a sense, a lot of technologists, scientists, and specialists, when it comes from the force, when they hit the real world, quote unquote, it's a little bit difficult to navigate because none of those skills were taught to them. And I thought if I plug myself in and kind of be the guide for a lot of new executives navigating that world, we can bring a lot more people who are very sufficient at technology problem solving over to the business and executive side, and thus kind of multiply the progress curve to the better.
Yeah, it's a definite issue. Oftentimes we see somebody who really has the tech skills, the best tech skill guy doesn't necessarily make the best leader.
Yeah.
And oftentimes there's a progression where you take your best coders or programmers or whatever, and you try to put them into leadership roles because they're one of the better ones, but they're really not. They don't have the experience, or they don't have. Oftentimes they don't even have the desire
Yeah.
to be a team leader and show others the way.
Yeah, absolutely. I usually I witness that all the time in technology organizations. Most of the time, they just don't even have transition programs, and they notice somebody who's good at coding. They think naturally they could be good at leading, and they
Mhm.
put people in uncomfortable situation. What I advise organizations generally is, and what I did in my previous organizations, I came up with this temporary role. Instead of a leader, you're a temporary supervisor for a specific function, and the whole organization know. So this way, individuals who are being promoted, they can temporarily try out the role, and everybody knows they're trying out. And if they don't like it, they can roll back to their previous role. But like in most organizations, that doesn't happen and sets up the person for failure. That's one. Number two, for those specialists who have been really good at their roles, I try to introduce more of an analogy that, let's say with coders, you interface with a machine all the time, and as a leader you interface with humans who interface with the machine, which makes the problem much more challenging and much more difficult, and then usually hits the sweet spot for those who love challenges and love problem solving, and they start realizing that they actually need to excel to the next level to become much better executives, and actually just being a coder might not be as challenging to them over a long time.
Mm-hmm. Funny story. I like over many years. I know a lot of military folks that get they've worked for um, Check Six and these other organizations that like teach leadership to groups of people that don't often get exposed to leadership type training. I know some guys that, like oil rig teams on oil rigs and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And it's a funny story. This one guy was saying he's trying to teach orienteering or land navigation as a team building experience to a bunch of financial tech guys, and they're all looking at him like, "Dude, why do we even care about this?" And finally, he's like, "Okay, let me put it to you in a way that maybe it'll make sense to you. If you listen to what I'm trying to teach you, you could walk as little as a mile through the woods. If you don't listen to what I'm trying to teach you, you could end up walking 6 to 8 miles before you finish." And they're like, "Oh, okay, yeah, we'll listen now." It's
Yeah.
just
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and so they put these military guys into these roles in these organizations trying to teach teamwork and leadership, and oftentimes the people are like, why are you even here, what are we listening to this all about? but
Yeah.
um but they're obviously the management, the leadership of the company realizes that we need to develop some of these people into leaders because we need team leaders.
100%, 100%. And what you have listed, and in my observation, I call it a lack of proper analogies. I mean, eventually, the lead guy brought up the good analogy, but I'd say that the smartest lawyer and the smartest doctor are not going to be able to talk to each other professionally. They have to go to the low level of analogy bridges to get to the place where they understand what the actual mission is and to help each other and support. And I also observe that gap between all the different executives, marketing, finance, sales, CEO, CTO, all of them really good in their own vertical, but they have to develop their what I call T-shaped skills in the sense you have a vertical I, which is your specialty, but
Mm-hmm.
you have to develop the T, which bridges your skill to other um, verticals. It makes you a much more integrative and collaborative partner for others and makes a much better organization.
Yeah, and it's hard to do. All right, hold that thought. We'll be right back. All right, we're back talking with Vladimir Baranov, executive coach for technology and science executive. So, Vladimir, what are some of the in dealing with entrepreneurship, new up and coming entrepreneurs? What are some of the leadership type issues that they're going to be dealing with?
Yeah, it's a great question. Um, I'd say one of the first observations and the mind shifts that happens to them is that the thing that they're trying to do is not the thing that they're coming from. Let's say if they're coming from a force, or they're coming from a large organization, they're coming from a previous job, there is a lot of support. For at the basics, somebody makes the coffee, somebody has the cafeteria, somebody manages the copy machine. When you become an entrepreneur, you are basically given all those thousand hats. And your previous experience have not taught you yet how to prioritize all those thousand priorities in effectively accomplishing your mission.
Mm-hmm.
So when new entrepreneur becomes and starts their role, um, there's a lot of assumptions coming in from the books, from the movies, from the newspapers, how others' narratives put together for what does it mean to be an entrepreneur, and they sort of run on those assumptions on that model of what would happen. They lock in, they focus on the mission, they win, they raise money, and they're successful. But in reality, what happens is that you're exposed to this plurality, thousands of different ways that you can take anything forward. And a lot of new executives get a little bit lost. How do
Mm.
you build this internal systems? How do you build this new model of the universe, which helps you propel to the place where you want to go? And a lot of the initial conversations that as executive coach that I have with those entrepreneurs, like, let's build that basic system that kind of moves you forward. And as I mentioned, like, let's build that system that allows you to walk for 1 mile as opposed to walking for 8 miles to get to the first milestone that you want to achieve.
Yeah. Um, I think that's one of the things that a new business owner experiences on day one is like, oh, holy cow, I've got to do everything.
Yeah.
Um, and prioritizing is one thing, but also delegating. Uh,
Yes.
Sometimes there's nobody to delegate it to. Uh,
100%.
so you might just hire somebody from the outside to go do these tasks for you. But too often, especially the small business owner, they just assume I got to do everything myself, and they like the fact that everything relies on them to get it done, and they don't delegate, and they get bogged down. It's often referred to as they they're always working in the business instead of working on the business.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
so that transition away from um, and there's a really good book, probably 20, 30 years old, called The E Myth.
Hmm.
And the E stands for entrepreneur. And it was just the basics of the book are like, you're really good at making widgets for an engineering company. So you want to go out on your own and start your own company, make the widgets yourself and make more money. But then you realize now you have to run an entire company. You don't get to spend your day making widgets, which is really what you like doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that transition usually takes time, but also takes a lot of self-exploration, right?
Mm-hmm.
some entrepreneurs do conclude, especially those from technical and science background, that I really don't like this leadership thing. I just want to go back and doing science and doing technology, and that is perfectly fine. Because what if you have clarity on your identity and your purpose, it's much easier to knock on the right doors.
Hmm.
But if you're filling the shoes of something that you of a role that you don't want to you have frustrations and frictions every day, and you're probably accomplishing goals of somebody else and not your own. So, as part of initial conversations with entrepreneurs, we try to figure out who they are, where are they trying to go, are they the right person for the role? And it's not about whether they're smart or not. It's like, do you want to really do that, or do you at least want to try it? And if you want to try it, this is probably the way that you should do it.
Yeah. And really, becoming an executive or becoming a leader in a corporation or business, it's really about dealing with people. I mean,
Yeah,
and time again, how often do you hear, I just can't, I hate dealing with people. I hate dealing with employees. They call in
yeah,
sick, they come and show up late, all those, all those people skills and the people management stuff is what people really don't like doing or don't like, that jumping into those kind of roles, especially with tech people. Cause let's face it, most tech engineering type people, they love things, not people.
yeah. There's definitely that. This is actually one of the reasons I named my company Human Interfaces. It's the space between the two people as we fill out
Yeah.
with voice and other methods of communication. Um, but I do, so like one of the things that I try to highlight for those individuals who don't like dealing with people is that they're just not good at it yet because they have so much experience working with machines or working with devices, working with more computer interfaces versus human interfaces. It's pretty easy. It's second nature.
Hmm.
Dealing with humans does not allow you to undo failure or undo bad sentence, right? So it doesn't allow you to experiment. It doesn't allow you to experiment with what the things you say. How do you order things? How do you communicate things? How do you coach somebody? And this is where, again, some of the initial conversations that we have is like I try to suggest where are the safer places that you can go outside of your work if you want to be a leader and you want to try it out, where you can express different ways to somebody else, the things that you want to do, and thus practice that art of communication. Because all the coding and all the technology stuff that you have learned, you have practiced, you've failed so many times. But there is no sandbox, so-called, for communication failures. Like where do you get to practice? And I generally recommend exploring your social skills in the context of theater or public speaking or going and doing improv comedy, where it's actually okay to fail. And you're together with other bunch of people who are also practicing and training on the same skill. And thus you can see whether or not it is really the thing that you want, but at the same time, improve it without being judged by others or taking a huge risk at your current employment.
Yeah. You're dealing with the same the scenario we talk about all the time. It's soft skills versus hard skills. Those hard skills are those programming skills, those ability, the trial and error type skills, the coding, the technical, the engineering degrees, the disciplines, the math, the science. But this is where oftentimes veterans can bring a lot to the table, because in the military you deal so much with people, you're immersed in dealing with people problems all the time.
Yeah,
There may be a lot of technical jobs in the military, but you're still dealing with a lot of uh, very important and frustrating people skills all the time. And that's why people coming out of the military tend to have very good leadership skills, because they've just been immersed in it. They were thrown in sink or swim, and you're out. The military is one of those places you can make all those people, human interaction, social skill mistakes and keep on going. And
absolutely.
they come out of the military with those, with great people skills and social skills, um, that can oftentimes bridge the gaps between some of these uh, technical tech types. So earlier you were saying, when one of the companies you're involved in, you did hire quite a few veterans, and you had some thoughts and ideas on with the veteran transition.
Yeah, absolutely. And something I wanted to share from what you said is that veterans do know that there's a lot of leadership and soft skills as part of the force, as part of the military that you have to practice and eventually perfect. Industry is completely ignorant of that.
Mm.
As you brought up before, the fintech people being taught by a military person, like, why we need to do that, right? They don't have an analogy, they don't have the connection to that actually exists. And what I advise generally to those who are going through the transition is that showcase your skills on the places that you are visible, be that LinkedIn, be that a website. Not, resume is very difficult, but in those places where you can describe exactly what kind of leadership things have you done, how many people have you led, what kind of missions were, how many those soft skills practices were able to understand, because it's difficult for those who were not in the military to understand the level of leadership that you have gained, leadership skills that you've gained as being part of the military. Um, Another, and this is like a small trick, and this is how we were able to hire a lot of qualified military people who are transitioning. We, as an industry, we're searching for the word transitioning in LinkedIn. And I don't know if every military person who is transitioning amends their LinkedIn for that, but there are people out there in industry who search specifically for the branch, be that Space Force, Air Force, Army, and for specific type of specialist with the keyword transitioning. And they know that within a year or within 6 months of that, when the person put
Yeah.
that tagline there, they know they can talk to them. And that ground is completely unexplored. So that's
Yeah.
one. Number two, if you are a transitioning officer and you are thinking of jumping industry, just go ahead and start friending as many people on LinkedIn in the LinkedIn as possible. Because when you're actually going to make that announcement that I'm finally off and I'm on the market, they will see that. So build your network before you transition. I think these days we live in a new era of LinkedIn where a lot more people will just accept your invite. It becomes more of a network growing. Well, let's say if you look at LinkedIn, let's say 10 years ago, it was a lot more gated where like you had to know the person before people would accept it. But now it's more accepted practice. And thus, for the jobs that you want, you will see that the leaders of that organization will see that you're now available and they will be interested in hiring. Because for a lot of, again, people in the industry, a lot of military is like very opaque. Like in the sense, we have no idea what the roles are, what the ranks are, what the responsibilities are. And I'm gonna say, like, anytime you speak to a military person, like, whoa, that's a cool person.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to for them to understand what's inside. So it is unfortunately burden on you to demonstrate either through video, through post, through some sort of content of how awesome you are in the industry's language. Um,
Yeah.
One way of doing it is also look for other profiles on LinkedIn or on YouTube of other officers who have transitioned and how have they communicated the fact that they had those skills before? How have they documented as part of LinkedIn? And it's very fine to be copycatting because in the end, it is very similar experience that you're bringing to the table.
Yeah. I mean, it seems kind of obvious once you say it, but I don't think that. I think that gets lost on a lot of military folks. If you, if you're wanting to go into the space industry and you're in the Air Force, find people that left the Air Force and are in the space industry and actually work for specific companies you're wanting to work for, and they have roles and jobs that you actually want to have, and at least connect with them
Yep.
and possibly try to start a conversation with them way ahead of time, and then and the whole thing about putting transitioning in your profile so that it comes up on searches. And there's probably a lot of companies that are looking for people that don't know to look for that keyword transitioning either.
Yep, absolutely. Education is required on both sides. So I wanted to quickly comment on something you mentioned. We love people like ourselves. So when we are reaching out to somebody who, let's say, went from Space Force into the industry and they're 3 years, let's say, ahead of you as part of that role, they absolutely will connect to you, absolutely will tell you all the inner secrets. Why? Because we love people like ourselves.
Yeah.
Follow the same path, find out those specialties who perhaps were part of your branch, part of your division, find where they are now, absolutely will, a high percentage of them will return your phone call or return your email or LinkedIn introduction. I do have to say with a caveat though, like people who have been in the industry 3, 4, 5, 7 years are better than those who've been, let's say, for 20 or 30 years,
Hmm.
because they might have forgotten the tricks that they had to do at the moment of the transition. And people who have
Yeah.
been in industry more recently, they are more aware of the new trends, the new trend lines, and things that could be helpful to you as you transition.
Hmm. So so if somebody's interested in your coaching services, how do they go about finding you?
Um, they can visit my website and schedule a discovery call. So my website is humaninterfaces.co. And I'll be happy to dive into whatever issues come to mind. Be like, could be a transitioning issues, or could be like if you're an executive or entrepreneur starting on your path as a specialist and going to executive. Happy to do a deep dive and see how we can work together.
And um, is it mostly individuals trying to improve themselves that would typically come to you and hire you, or do you find there's companies that'll actually hire you and say, "We need you to coach this guy"? What does that look like?
It's a great question. A lot of times it's individuals, but on occasions I do work with companies where, let's say, you have a CEO who has a bit of friction with a CTO or vice versa, and then it becomes more of a team coaching exercise where I have to understand both of the sides and moderate sort of debate, or sometimes I call it like marriage counseling between the founders and executives in order for them to work closer together. And you know what? Co-founder relationships actually sometimes are much closer than marriages because you spend a lot more time with your co-founder than with your spouse
Yeah.
as you're building out your company.
Oh, that's funny. Um, what are some of the big highlights that you see with people that are already in leadership roles that may not have had the appropriate leadership experience in the past, especially in the tech side of things? What are some of the biggest things
Yeah.
that stand out as far as blind spots or shortcomings?
So I, if with permission, I would focus on the word highlights because I like to celebrate those insights and mind shifts that happen over the time when we ask very specific questions. Because every time you start something new and that hasn't been done before in your life, you're kind of venturing in unknown. And a lot of times I see with my clients kind of mentally creating lists. Wow, I didn't know this was working this way before. Because you start looking at things now from more of the top, less from the side, and more from the bottom, and it encourages a lot more people like they can do that. I can do that much better. Of course, I'm so much more capable because we're shielded from who really are running our organizations by a lot of narrative, by a lot of news, by a lot of books, by a lot of public media that obfuscates a lot of the personalities which are up there. But once you start practicing yourself, and this is what I see with my clients, once they get to observe and practice it themselves, they might say, oh my God, I'm capable of so much more. And it's so exciting to watch of that blossoming of individual, blossoming of that character who's now running at like 10x, 100x towards their mission because I just asked a right question. And this is like very satisfactory for me, but it's a lot more satisfactory for my clients. And over time, they improve in their relationships, they improve their understanding of their self-identity, and it's much easier to now carry that lens around and make those purposeful decisions which drive them towards their goals and milestones.
Yeah. Um, do you find that most of the time you'll work with somebody for about 6 months and then that'll be it, or do you work over long periods of time, or you come back in and check in, that kind of thing?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it very much depends on the individual. For the ones which stay with me shorter, they have a very specific issue that they want to work through. Let's say they have an immediate conflict with their co-founder, they want to make an immediate career change, and those things usually get resolved within 3, 4 months. Other executives work with me on a more of a sounding board capacity, where we just meet on a regular basis, once or twice per month, where we just they would download everything that has happened and it will ask specific questions, perhaps of my perspective, or perhaps something that they want to explore deeper through questions, through coaching, so they can understand themselves, the perspectives that they have inside their own minds. Coaching sometimes comes helpful there because we lie to ourselves all the time. I do so until it comes out of my mouth and somebody says it back. I'm like, did I really say that? So it kind of allows me to arrange things on my shelves, and it helps my clients also to do that. And they usually stay longer, those sounding board clients, for maybe 12 months, maybe a couple of years.
Yeah, awesome. All right, Vladimir, we're getting close to the end of our time here. I do want to give you the last word. I usually like to ask if you're talking to somebody in the military, some form of transition, maybe they already got out recently and they're looking to get into business ownership, entrepreneurship. From your perspective, what kind of advice do you have for them?
So, number one advice I would give, because of strict hierarchy in Army, sometimes you're prohibited, restricted to ask certain things. It's very different in industry. Your number one goal is to learn how to ask as many questions as possible without making the other person feel uncomfortable. But
Mhm.
you wouldn't know until you already make the first person uncomfortable what it means to ask that many questions. So that will create a lot of discovery, that create new information for you for which you're from which you're going to be able to make the right decision. So if I have to say one thing, absolutely learn how to ask a lot of questions. And that's actually it's very much respected in the industry because they know that you're curious about what they're doing and you care about the answers.
Awesome. Well, hey, Vladimir, thanks for sharing your entrepreneurial success story. Look forward to seeing your future success, and thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Joe.
All right, you bet. We're asking Mike.